Good morning. If you have not yet seen a copy of Informulo magazine, which is magazine about the global tech sector, please pick up a copy on your way out and pick up your coat. Let me now introduce the panel. May I please ask Nicolas Brusson from BlaBlaCar, Giuseppe Zocco from Index Ventures, and Mikkel Svane from Zendesk to come up.
Thanks.
So let me give a quick introduction to our panel. To my immediate right, Nicolas Brusson from BlaBlaCar. So for those of you who are not familiar with the company, they are a intercity ride-sharing service that has 10 million members. In more than a dozen countries. They've just launched in India a few days ago. They're also present in Russia and through much of Europe. They transport more than 2 million people every month, more than Eurostar. And in August, it received a $100 million investment from Index Ventures, Excel, and several other VCs. This followed earlier round of $10 million. On the end there, we have Mikkel Svane, another great European entrepreneur. Mikkel and two other Danes started Zendesk, which is a very popular SaaS-based customer service software company, in a loft in Denmark back in 2007, and very quickly moved to Silicon Valley, where they scaled the company globally, and they did an IPO on the New York Stock Exchange last May, and today are valued somewhere around $1.7, $1.8 billion. Mikkel has just written a book called Startup Land, and it is the story of how three guys risk everything to turn an idea into a global business. If you're interested in hearing more from Mikkel after the panel and knowing more about the book, both he and another author, Alex Christie, who wrote a book called Gutenberg's Apprentice, will be doing a book discussion immediately after this panel in the Wirecard lounge downstairs. So we also have on the panel Giuseppe Zocco from Index Ventures. Index Ventures is a venture capital firm that invests both in Europe and is also present in Silicon Valley. They invested in both Zendesk and BlaBlaCar, and they have a pretty good success rate. I think in the last 18 months, you had 8 billion exits worth $1 billion or more, and at least 4 of them came from Europe. So I'm gonna just give each of our panelists a really just a very couple brief moments to talk a little bit more about what they do and who they are, and then we're gonna go right into this discussion about, as Alexandra put it, should I stay or should I go? The pros and cons of scaling a business globally from Europe or Silicon Valley. So, Nicolas, some people get BlaBlaCar confused with Uber. Tell us, how you differ from that company.
Yeah, so it's a fair question, a question we get pretty much all the time. So let me maybe start by saying that from a user point of view, actually our users don't confuse us for Uber or any taxi service, right? And probably the way to describe it is, what do we disrupt as a company, and what does Uber disrupt as a company? So Uber, as we know, is going to disrupt mostly the taxi industry or short-distance travel within a city. What we end up disrupting is long-distance travel. It's city-to-city travel. So if anything, it would be the trains, the long-distance bus. So that's the industry we disrupt. So in a way, it's a bit comparing like a high-speed train and a taxi, right? So it's two different markets. But also in the way we operate, BlaBlaCar is very much a community. So essentially, you join BlaBlaCar as a member, and we don't manage like a fleet of drivers or professional drivers. Essentially, what we do is we just foster a community, and people within that community actually are going to share their ride when they drive from, let's say, Munich to Berlin. And then they're going to take 2, 3, 4 passengers along the way and share the cost. So we've been building that initially out of France, and then very quickly, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but very quickly, we expanded all over Europe, and we've built this European platform, this European transport company, and more recently we raised $100 million to go global, essentially.
Okay. And just, you know, I think a couple points that are interesting for the audience is, another difference with Uber is that, you know, basically through your community, you pick your driver and you look, you know, and decide if you want to go with that person or not, and you're able to check their social network rating and figure out whether you want to go with this person or not.
Yeah, exactly. It's really based on the community, right? So you join that not as a driver or not as a passenger, you join that as a member, and then you end up sharing your ride as a driver or taking a ride as a passenger, but then you always have a choice. So it's a two-way vetting process.
Right. Okay, thanks. So now let me turn to you, Mikkel. So tell us a little bit about how the focus of your company is evolving now that you've gone public.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks first and foremost for the introduction. It's very fitting. Zendesk is a customer service platform. I am Danish, thus the broken accent here. But we built it out of a kitchen in Copenhagen, moved it to San Francisco, and have had a time of our life building this company. We today have more than 50,000 businesses around the world using Zendesk. A lot of these are small businesses and fast-growing companies. Companies like Uber, companies like Airbnb, companies like Dropbox are using Zendesk for providing great customer service. Most recently, and also in connection with the IPO, we have matured. I got my little tie, and we are starting to serve much more mature, large enterprises. So we now serve governments, for example, GovUK, the FCC in the United States. We serve big enterprises like Ingersoll Rand in the US, Red Bull here in Europe, and so many other companies.
Okay. Thank you. So, Shabby, tell us a little bit, you know, help us get the context for Index, and, you know, seems you're placing big bets on European companies. So tell us why you believe in Europe.
Thank you, Jennifer. And actually, we're a startup. When we started in '96, the idea was to build a platform to help entrepreneurs to be as successful as possible, building their business globally, regardless of where they were based, where they were European companies that obviously go to the US and expand, or US companies help them come to Europe. And I think over time, we have seen the European ecosystem mature so much that in these days, particularly in the last 18 months, you alluded to that in your opening, if we just take our example where 8 companies graduated to sort of the billion-dollar, the unicorn club. 4 of them were clearly European, with Criteo, King, Supercell, and Just Eat. And one, I think it's at least half European. I think we claim the Danish roots as half European. So whether the companies stay in Europe and then they go international, whether they move in the early days like Mikkel has done with his team, or whether they grow in the US and then they come over here, this is becoming really a global platform. And the good news is that Europe now is much more fertile than it used to be.
Okay, great. So I think that's a great segue for the issue of, you know, raising enough funds to be able to scale a company globally. So well, let me start with you, Mikkel. I mean, because you actually left Europe, you know, 7 years ago because you didn't have a great experience raising money here. So maybe, you know, tell us a little bit about that and what your experience was fundraising in the Valley, and then we'll jump to Nicolas and
Sure.
talk about
So we moved to the US in 2009, and that means that we started pitching VCs during 2008. And that was a relatively tough year. That was the year of the credit crunch. It definitely didn't make it easier. But the reality was that there was very little money to raise in Europe. I know that it's different today. I know there's a bunch of large funds and so on. But back then, it was almost impossible to raise money. Then going to the US and starting pitching there was a completely different experience. Suddenly we were welcomed. We had a much larger audience to talk to about raising money. And we're also successful in raising both our Series A and right after that our Series B, and moved the company to San Francisco.
Okay. Now, Nicolas, you know, have been able to raise well over $100 million, being headquartered out of France. So, you know, this is kind of a relatively new phenomenon in Europe. Tell us a little bit about, you know, the fundraising experience here.
Yeah, and I think clearly it has changed since 2009 and in the last 10 years. I mean, clearly it has improved a lot in Europe. But for us, I mean, we've done that in steps, right? So the first step really was 2010, when we had like a Series A or seed round of like 1.2 million euro, which was really like building the company in France, proving, not even the business model, like proving the activity. Then we had another step, actually end of 2011, which was $10 million from Accel Partners. And back then it was really, okay, can we go European? So the big bet was, can we transform this French company into a European company? And in a way, we've been pretty successful at doing that between 2011 and 2014. And in 2014, it became much easier to go and raise $100 million, but not as a French company, really, even though we HQ'd in France, but as a European company. So we could say, we are number one all over Europe. Now we want to go into Russia, we want to go into India, we want to go global, essentially. So I think it's possible to raise that amount of money, not as a French HQ'd company, but as a European player, as a European leader. So we've done that in steps, and today it's possible. And I guess what's even more interesting is it's possible to do it without being in the US and without going to the US and without pitching a story going into the US. And today you have investors both in Europe and the US, so we raise from a mix of European and US investors that now understand that, right? Because they see what's happening in all the emerging markets, they see what's happening in Europe, and you can really pitch a story saying, well, actually my home market is Europe, I'm going to go global, I might go to the US, I might not go to the US, but the market is big enough, and we need $100 million to do that. And today it's possible. I think 5-10 years ago, it would have been pretty tricky. So it's clearly moving pretty fast and moving in the right direction.
So what do you advise your companies? I mean, would you say that, like, if they're in the B2B space, is the U.S. single market still, a better place for those companies to start? And are there more consumer-oriented opportunities here?
Well, I think, as Nicolas was saying, the important thing is to have a global ambition from the get-go and to structure your company team and the skill set with that in mind. And so wherever you are based in the beginning, the early days are really just about assembling the team, crystallizing the vision, and launching the company. And then, entrepreneurs are so resourceful, they'll go wherever the business needs them to go. We have noticed that if you're particularly in the enterprise business, you may have a little bit of an advantage being in the Valley because the talent is more abundant. You have customers and suppliers of talent, as well as customers for your product close by. But for consumer businesses, for example, since the days of Skype and a number of mobile-based platforms, for example, like King and Supercell, and what BlaBla is doing, what Funding Circle is doing, shows that a lot of these companies can actually grow from a European base as long as they have global ambitions. It is very important, I would say, early on to go into the US market, to occupy the territory, so that there is no US player that comes back and sort of eats your lunch. And in some cases, just like what Mikkel has shown, is if you transplant your team early on, then you can benefit from that growing market. So I would say there is no one recipe, but it's important to understand where your talent is, where your customers are, how easy it is to build a team. And by the way, in the Valley, there is more talent, but it's a little bit more competitive, so people tend to hop from company to company. In Europe, there is more stability in the talent pool. So there are pros and cons, and I think we've seen great teams succeed on both sides of the Atlantic.
So one of the cons of building in Europe is this whole idea of, there's 25 different markets, and this is something that, Mikkel, you might want to talk about a little bit, just this whole idea of, you have to deal with different regimes in every market, and is that one of the reasons why you decided not to stay?
No, I don't think that has anything to do with that. Like, there's a mentality in Silicon Valley, and I, like, for every entrepreneur out here who haven't visited Silicon Valley, I will encourage them to visit San Francisco and Silicon Valley and suck up some of that vitality and inspiration and energy there is there. Because yes, there is a lot of people jumping from one company to the other, but that's because there's so many sexy opportunities out there. Right. It is a very inspirational place with fantastic companies building amazing things, and it's all within like a 40-mile radius, so you have everything right there in front of you, and you get so inspired. And I think that was, okay, we raised money in the US because we had a hard time raising money in Europe. But we also learned so much from coming to the US, from coming to Silicon Valley. Like, in Denmark, we were considered like 3 guys in a room with a computer. And that was very cute, Oh, are you sitting there with your computer? Like, we come to California, and suddenly, like, they're looking at us as, okay, you can you can go out and disrupt the entire enterprise software space. And we're like, okay, let's do that. That sounds a lot funnier than the other thing. And that there is no ceiling, that you can dream as big as you want to, and people can actually help you execute on those dreams. Getting that inspiration into your DNA, into your company, is just, it's what takes it from just being a startup to being this next generation company.
So I think that, I wanted to ask you, Nicolas, because you actually spent time in the Valley, you worked there, but then you decided to come back to Europe and build a global company from here. What led you to do that?
Yeah, so I've gone the other way. I've gone the wrong way. I went from Silicon Valley to Europe, which is a weird thing to do. No, but it's true. I mean, the DNA point actually Mikkel mentioned is true. I mean, for me, I started actually my first job. So I finished my studies in Silicon Valley. I got my first job in Silicon Valley, and I ended up in a company where we raised $85 million. So it was during 1999-2000. We raised $85 million. We wanted to conquer the world. We've burnt all the money. We went Chapter 11 after 2 years, but you learn a lot, right? You learn on the way up, you learn on the way down. And clearly that level of ambition did not really exist in Europe back in 1999 and 2000. I think today it has changed, right? So today you see European entrepreneurs that actually spend some time in the Valley. So I spent 7 years there. Fred, actually, as a co-founder, spent 2 or 3 years there, get to Stanford. So as a team of co-founders, we have like 10 years actually in Silicon Valley, right? So in a way, we bring that DNA into a European company. But it's not only that. I think the thing we've been missing in Europe in the last 10, 15 years, and it's changing now, is that, especially on consumer internet, the issue is not the market, right? If you look at e-commerce, food delivery, hotels, what we do, like transport between cities, the market in Europe is as big or bigger than the US. So it's not like a market problem. And even US companies, when they get into Europe, they don't think of one single market. They think of all of that as a complete European market. I think the issue is like, how do we address Europe as a market and the challenge of becoming a European company? And for us, it's been like for the last 3 or 4 years, actually, it's been like a big DNA change where you, as co-founders, you need to hold the line and say, okay, we're going to be a European company. Our market is Europe. We're going to be in every market in Europe. And we need like local teams in every country. So today we have 9 teams actually out of BlaBlaCar. And then you sort of push that ambition to your team, then to your investors, then you can raise more money, and you can create that momentum actually from Europe, but and then you can go global.
But it is incredibly expensive. Like, it is incredibly expensive setting up operations in Europe. Like, you have to have legal entities in every country. You have to deal with local labor laws. Thank you very much, Germany. You have to deal with, like, taxes. I know that VAT is the last thing you think about at the night and the first thing in the morning. Like, you have to deal with all these different things, and like Europe as a whole is like impossible to scale.
But when you start from France, everything looks simple after that. so every company setup was simpler.
And I think just to build on that point, I think Mikkel said something which is important, which is the mentality of building a company globally is something that really Silicon Valley has honed over the years. And a lot of our European entrepreneurs, we say, you have to either be there. A lot of our partners have studied or worked there, and you have to go there, and there is this entrepreneurial mosquito in the Valley that punctures you and gives you this entrepreneurial DNA, and you have to be infected with that way of thinking, which is, be global leader, be ambitious. That's very important wherever you are.
Yes, absolutely. So, Nicolas, talk a little bit about, beyond having the entrepreneurial spirit, how did you break this problem of like, just building a national champion and then going to the next country, and it's an expensive, long process. You proved that it's easy to, or not easy, but it's possible to scale quickly. And how did you do it?
Yes, so I mean, the first thing is to do it early, right? So we did not like prove the business model of BlaBlaCar. BlaBlaCar was still very much under the radar, actually, and we were already in Spain, expanding into Italy, acquiring a company in Poland, and we've done that. So we've done that early. So as the first, I guess, the first recipe. And when we raised $10 million actually 3 years ago, it was a bit surprising to people, right? It was still a lot of money, just like 100 million is surprising today, but in a way, it was sort of like the way to fuel that ambition. Then the way we've done it actually, and maybe it applies more to BlaBlaCar than any other business, because we end up being like a multi-local community, even though we end up global, at the end it's a domestic service, it's domestic city-to-city transport. We've done that by acquisition. So today, as a company, a fairly young company, we've done 5 acquisitions already. We'll do probably a lot more acquisitions this year and next year. And that's how we get into Italy, that's how we get into Russia, that's how we get into Poland and some other countries. So what we've done is we've done this acqui-hiring strategy where we find the best team locally, and we decide instead of building, actually, it's going to go faster to convince this team to join BlaBlaCar, to acquire this company, bring the team on board, and that's been pretty successful for us, essentially. And to give you a measure here, 50% of the member growth of BlaBlaCar today comes from these acqui-hires that we've done in the last month or years.
Okay. So Zendesk is kind of proof that there isn't any one rule, right? There's different approaches. And for your business, you said in the beginning you decided to laser focus on the U.S. market, and then later go on.
No, I think we built the company out of San Francisco and very focused on building a strong team out of San Francisco. But already from day one, we've had customers all over the world. Even today, we have more than 30% of our business in Europe. And we serve the European market through local entities, but a lot of our operations in Europe are located in Dublin, Ireland, where we have we're very successful in attracting talent from all of Europe to work out of Dublin. And Dublin has become kind of this, pit stop between Europe and US today. But we have an organic model where our software is self-serve. Our customers come to us through the website and start using the software themselves. And it's not until we have a certain penetration and maturity of the market that we then put people on the ground that can help further penetrate in the market. Okay.
We're just about out of time, so I'm going to give you the last word. As an investor in these two companies, what does the success of these two companies say about Europe's ability to build unicorns, either in Silicon Valley or in Europe or anywhere else in the world, for that matter?
Well, first of all, I'd say these are two examples of great entrepreneurial talent who wanted to succeed, and in one case, went to the US, in the other case, homeland in France, and then globally. And I think today we can say that if you take Silicon Valley, the 40 miles around Stanford, that's a unique place, but the rest of the world is very similar. So London and New York and Paris and Boston are now very similar hubs. And I think if you have a good team with high ambition level and a good skill set, wherever you are in one of these hubs, you have a good chance to be a global leader if you're dedicated enough. And obviously in the Valley is a little easier, but it can be possible in all of those. And there are many examples of this around the table in the room here.
Okay, and with that, I'd like the audience to please give a nice round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much.